The class today is managing growth, pitfalls to avoid and how to avoid them. We did change the topic for today, but we will be covering this today. Our presenter will be Joe Jackson, our Executive Director at the Mid-South Atlantic Small Business Transportation Resource Center. And Mr. Joe will begin and start speaking.
Great, Beth.
Beth, I saw you just tried to unmute me and I'm on a call. I'm so sorry.
Okay, I figured, okay. I'll mute you back.
Okay, Beth, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a great fall day. It's a beautiful day out there. I'm gonna have a little allergies going on, but I'll be okay. As Beth mentioned, we originally had the bonding class scheduled for tonight, but we had to make some adjustments, so we're good with that. So we're gonna move up the managing growth pitfalls to avoid and how to avoid them. This is a class that we've worked very concurrently with the Surety Fidelity Association of America. When we started this program probably about 15 years ago, we met with the SFAA and we said, okay, we need to really understand, regardless of any small business size or any business size, you know, why is it that some businesses fail and some succeed when they have a bond or when they're working on major contracts or construction contracts? So we did a compilation of all the issues and concerns that businesses encountered, and we put together this presentation just to share with you. Beth, I don't know why it's jumping. Is it on your end? Because I'm not moving my slide. Okay, we'll see what's going on. So we put together this presentation to share some of the pitfalls and some of the best practices that we've learned from over the years, and we've been able to share this with businesses of all sizes, and they've been able to take a look at some of the areas that businesses must focus on, and most importantly, areas to avoid. Just quickly before I get into the presentation, we will have a break tonight, so probably in about 30 minutes to 45 minutes, depending on questions, we'll take a 10-minute break. Basically, I will pause for questions after about 2 or 3 slides. If you have any questions, just type them in, the room, and, we will also field them accordingly as well. But just to share with you a little bit about my background, as Beth mentioned, I am the Executive Director for the Mid-South Atlantic Resource Center, Small Business Transportation Resource Center. Currently serve as president of the Greater Atlanta Economic Alliance. The Alliance was started in 2000. We started the program at the beginning of the then Hartsfield-Jackson $6.5 billion expansion program. And the whole purpose was to ensure that we were able to develop a pool of minority female businesses who were successful in participating on transportation, construction related projects at the airport and beyond. So since that time, we've rolled off of the airport, but we continue to work on the USDOT projects, and our region covers Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee. And for those who weren't on the last call or at the first opening session, we've pretty much mirrored the same bonding education program series, in our other regions of South Carolina and Tennessee, similar that we're doing now. Now, the exciting thing that's taking place with the bonding education program now is that we are, at the forefront of the bipartisan infrastructure projects. And we're excited about what's taking place. We've been meeting very closely with our leaders in Washington to make sure that all the transportation modes throughout the country, respectively in the state of Georgia, basically carve out opportunities for DBEs and small business concerns to participate on those bipartisan infrastructure projects. I don't know what's going on with my slide right now, but once I get in the presentation, I'll correct those. I just wanted to make sure that you all know what's taking place with this particular class. Also, I want to share with you that your participation is important. Beth has been doing a great job making sure she identified those who are participating in the class presentation. And we want to make sure that you continue to join us. Excuse me 1 second. I'm just going to reset my presentation as I'm talking to you. Because
I don't know why it's jumping back and forth.
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to fix it. I think it may be on a yeah, I'll fix it. I think it's on a time deal. I'll fix that. But nevertheless, your participation is very important. Beth is making sure that she administers the roll call, because that is important. And one of our takeaways from the program is to make sure that we have participation, because towards the end of the program, we will have a class recognition and a certificate of participation during the end of the class. And I just want to share with you that we've already confirmed that we're going to have at least 3 of our members from Washington. They will be in attendance and they will come to Atlanta and join us. So we want to make sure that we're able to recognize all those who have participated, and we want to make sure that we're able to recognize you on that day. So we're excited about that. Anything else, Beth, you want to say about that?
No. Oh, I want to, yeah, your participation. We would like for you guys, but I need more people to send me their homework. Appreciate the people who have sent the homework. We would send them to the instructor. The instructor would give feedback. And I need a little more effort on the homework, please. And you guys will benefit from that. Right, Mr. Joe?
No, absolutely. That's important. The homework is important. The full participation is important. So we definitely want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. And once again, I said this before, and I'm going to say it once again. You know, you all as business individuals, you have participated in various, workshops and technical assistance programs, and that's great. But we want to make sure that you are aware that this is not the typical workshop. We have a method to the madness, and we just want you to trust us, because at the end of the program and at the end of the workshops, and I share with you over and over again, this is when the bonding education program really begins, because we're going to sit down with you after we've reviewed your intake forms. We're going to look at your assessments, and then what we're going to do is definitely make sure that we begin to work with you to provide a prescriptive plan for each and every one of you. Okay, good. So I'm glad we got that out of the way. Let me see one more. I think I've corrected it, Beth, but let me try one more thing. And sorry about that. I believe it was on the timer and I took it off, but it's still showing. Bear with me. There was 2 up, okay, that's what it was. Get rid of that one. Don't save.
Again, I want to know who is the contractor participant that's called in on an iPhone. Could you please tell me your name? I'm asking to unmute, and we need to know your identity. Otherwise, I have to exclude you from the class.
Beth, this is Tiffany. You probably see Bryson Constructors and my iPhone.
Oh, yeah. Good. Great. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay.
So let's see. Mr. Joe Jackson, we'll proceed now.
Yeah, bear with me, Beth. I'm taking it off of,
Okay.
it was locked in transitions. I'm removing the transitions. Okay, so hopefully that will save. Give me a few seconds here. We should be okay. Okay, good. We're ready to go. Let's make this work. Okay, great. All right, so good. So once again, pitfalls and how to avoid them. Some of these things that we will share, I'm sure you've seen them before, but once again, when I meet with businesses, you can rest assured when we sit down with them and we begin to look at some of the issues they're experiencing, you can rest assured it's some of the things that we will discuss tonight, okay? Number one, some of the factors that lead to contractors' failure is, first of all, there's unrealistic growth on the company's behalf. So we want to make sure companies have a reasonable, realistic growth plan. Secondly, is performance issues. And this is something that everybody's dealing with right now, coming off of the great resignation with the pandemic. We're having labor issues and concerns. Everyone's experiencing that. And we continue to work together with labor unions and with businesses to find solutions, because these are issues that are real and we're constantly dealing with. So number one, it's also performance issues. Secondly, is continuity issues. We need to make sure that we have the right transition plans and continuity for our business, because life happens. You all participated in the accounting class last week. Josh provided a wealth of information. The other issues that we constantly see is that businesses are not working on their businesses from an accounting issue. When we go into business, we go into business to be profitable. We're just not going into business just because it's something good to do and it's a hobby. If we're going into business because it's something that we really enjoy doing and we treat it like a hobby, you know, we probably need to take a step back and reset. So we really need to take a look at the accounting issues to make sure, as Josh mentioned, that we set our business up on a project cost basis so we can determine which projects are profitable, which projects are successful. And once again, for CEOs, when we consult with CEOs, we're not going to ever tell you what to do for your business. But what we're going to do and what we do well is we put you, the CEO or the decision maker of your business, in the best position to make the best decision for your company. Management issues and concerns. Trust me, if you start seeing the red flags, deal with them. I learned something very early in my corporate experience, and I had a great mentor to tell me something. And once I pivoted and started taking that approach, I never had a real issue that I couldn't address. And he said one thing, Joe, if there is an issue that you don't really want to deal with, don't deal with the issue, the processes that come so natural and easy. Take on, do not be afraid to take on the difficult managerial issues. Once you do that, everything else is easy. So if you have a difficult managerial issue that you have to deal with it, gather all the facts, take all the proper provisions and address it and deal with it. Trust me, it'll make your life a whole lot simpler and easier. And of course, as I said, life happens. There are other factors that will arise throughout the course of your business, and we have to be prepared to address them. The key components is basically all about managing growth. We want to make sure that we're able to manage our growth, have the right bonding and insurance provisions in place to make sure that if situations happen, you and your company and the fiduciary of your business is definitely safe. Make sure you have dispute resolution and claims already covered. When you read your contracts, make sure you identify, because in every contract, it's going to tell you how you're responsible for dealing with disputes or claims, right? This is an area so often I deal with businesses. When a situation arises, I always ask them, what does your contract say? What did your contract say about dealing with a claim or resolving any type of dispute. This is the very first thing you have to make sure you read and address in your contract before you sign it, because every contractor is different. Every contract terms and conditions are different. So often we get so comfortable with seeing the same terms and conditions over and over again. So we think it's automatic. Do not take it for granted. Make sure you're able to identify if a claim arises in this project or contract, if a dispute arises in this contract or project, do I clearly understand the provisions and how we're to resolve them? In some contracts, you all are aware, as a general contractor or a subcontractor, you have the onus of bringing the dispute or bringing the issue or claim to your next privity. If you're contracted directly with the owner, you have a certain time frame where you have to bring it to the owner's attention. If you're a subcontractor, you have a certain time frame where you have to bring it to the general contractor's attention. Do not be afraid to bring the issue or to address it and deal with it. In most cases, I've seen that the owner and I've seen that the general contractor will appreciate someone not hiding the big green elephant. And I always say that you can't hide the big green elephant. There's money associated. And how do you deal with it? You take it one bite at a time, one step at a time. So make sure that you read the provisions in your contract and you're comfortable with change orders, claims and disputes. It's clearly noted in your contract, and you have a clear understanding. So when it arises, you can bring it to the owner's attention, the general contractor's attention, and make sure you may have to remind them, 1 second, I have the due diligence, or I have the ownership of bringing this to your attention based on what the contract is saying. This is how we're going to resolve it. So let's discuss it. Okay. Also, we have to always make sure, and you guys will have an experience, the bidding and estimating class, but so often problems arise during the bidding and estimating stage because, one, we did not bid the project correctly. We did not estimate the job correctly. So during the bidding and estimating phase, this is an opportunity for you to dot the I's, cross the T's, and make sure that you're going over everything to make sure that once you sign that contract and receive the notice to proceed, you're now not bringing up issues pertaining to the estimating and the bidding. All right. In most cases, I want to make sure we stress some of the pitfalls that I've seen with DBEs and working with federally funded projects as subcontractors. When they start submitting their invoice, they're submitting their invoice based on lump sum, or they're submitting their invoice based on basically other terminologies based on quantities and materials, or et cetera. And their project and their invoices are being rejected because now the contractor is saying, no, you submitted a lump sum price. So if you submitted a lump sum price, you need to understand what that's associated with and what that entails. If you're submitting any other estimating criteria based on, linear feet, materials, or et cetera, you have to make sure that you understand that, because when you're submitting your invoice, that's exactly what they want to see. They don't want to see the fact that you said, here's $1 million for the concrete work that I provided. No, they want to see basically your linear feet, your materials, and all that great stuff. And they want to see it duly noted so you can address it and get paid for that. And so often I've seen fights occur with contractors wanting to call the owner, they're wanting to walk off the job, all because this was not clear. So please make sure when you're taking on the project, you clearly understand based on the bid, based on the estimate, because that's going to entail how you're going to invoice on a monthly basis. You want to make sure that you have the right project management on the job and the supervision. This is another area where I see not just small businesses. I'm working on large projects right now, and the owner is upset with the general contractor because the project management team is changing all the time. And they're not happy about that, because what that tells the owner is, now I do not have confidence in your management, because what you're doing, you're losing the legacy and the integrity of the project. Once we go from 30% into a project to 50% into a project, now if you're changing your project management, now we're going to have to bring the new project management up to speed, and that costs time and money. And if you do that, because once again, life happens, you want to make sure you have a great transition plan with the owner to bring on the new project manager, to make sure that the owner or the general contractor feels confident that you have passed on the previous legacy from the old management to the new management, and possibly have the new management work with the management team that's transitioning off of the project to make sure everybody feels comfortable with the transition. Because once again, it happens to the owners, it happens to GCs, it happens to subcontractors, and in the contracting world, it happens, but there's a right way and there's a wrong way to do it. The wrong way to do it is just to have a project manager show up to a meeting, okay, an owner's meeting or a subcontractor's meeting, and they're seeing them for the first time. Make sure you have the right business planning, and most importantly, make sure that you have the adequate finances for the actual project. So those are key components that we will address and delve into as we discuss, managing growth and pitfalls and how to avoid them. The unrealistic growth really takes place, and you spoke about it before, when there's a change in the type of work performed. If there's something that you really have not experienced in a type of work or a type of scope that you've never really dealt with before, don't try to fake it until you make it. Make sure you get the right legacy, make sure you ask all the right questions, and make sure that when you mobilize for the project, you're ready to basically perform, okay? Also, I've seen, so often where contractors are, working in geographical areas where they've never really worked in before. I tell people all the time, more is not always better. I have stories where I've seen contractors, go to a different market that they've never worked in before, but it sounded good. It was the right opportunity. And when they met for the first time in that geographical area, the politics, the whole climate was something that they've never experienced before, and it cost them their bond. I have horror stories where I've warned contractors, do not go into that state, because that state has a whole different mechanism of dealing with contractors. So I want to make sure you make a quick note and clearly understand what it means when we're talking about lien waivers and claims from state to state. When you're doing work in Georgia, and if you're working on a public works project, you clearly need to understand what it means by the lien waivers. You need to understand the interim lien waivers. You need to understand all the way throughout the final lien waivers, what that means to you. And the reason why it's important, because in the bond world, if you submit, and I'm going to pause for a second, and I want to be very clear, because we've had many, many bond claims in this area. When you're submitting a pay application and it's a bonded project, you have a small window from state to state, depending on their terms, to file a claim based on that invoice. If you file too early, there's no action. If you file too late, it's been extinguished. So you have to make sure that you understand the window, okay? I want to make sure that's clear because that goes both ways. I've also seen a surety company who attempted to file a claim on a subcontractor based on a lien waiver that basically had not even been paid by the owner. So therefore, it was too early. But what happened, once the affidavit started flying and the subcontractor was not aware of what they were dealing with, they started freaking out and they started responding to the affidavit, calling their lawyers, getting everybody involved. And had they just took a step back and understood what the surety company was asking for in the performance, and they had the right, because they had not been paid for that scope of work, there was no action involved. So therefore, the surety company never should have started affidavits flying for that performance for that invoice period. Now, I'm just going to mention that. I want you to just post that and clearly understand when you're going after and submitting your pay applications, everything, your scope of work, your performance at that time, always should follow that invoice period, okay? So if someone's giving you issues for something that has not occurred, it's really no issue, you have time, okay? If they're giving you issues for something that you've already been paid for, okay, you now really need to find out what the issue is, because that's been extinguished. You've been paid for the work, you've provided the work, the owner and the GC has accepted the work, so why would you uncover that, okay? So once you get a bond, I'm just sharing with you, there are games that surety companies will play, there are games that GCs would play, and also there are games that subcontractors would play. And let me tell you what that game is. That game is, do not use a lien waiver or a mechanical lien or call a lien to serve as your accounts payable department. Okay? I just want to say that because so often I've seen a lot of subcontractors, as soon as they submit their invoice, they start talking about, I'm going to call a lien. Well, you have to be careful, because once you submit your invoice, you have to make sure that the GC has submitted that invoice to the owner. Once the GC submits that invoice to the owner, that's when the clock begins. So if you're going to follow that deal, that's when you want to know. You want to find out not only when you submit your invoice, but you want to make sure that you know when the GC has submitted your invoice for that payment period to the owner, okay? That's when the clock starts. Also, you want to make sure if there's a significant increase in the size of the project, individual projects, these are things that are important. You want to make sure that if you have your scope, if they're asking for change orders, if they're asking for, you know, addendums or things that was not a part of the bid previously, you want to make sure that you document that and you bring it to your GC or your owner's attention. And that's important, okay? And most importantly, I always say more is not always better, rapid or over expansion. You know, you want to make sure that, because once a project gets started, you want to manage your schedule, you want to manage your scope, and make sure you're aware anything that the GC or the owner is asking you to do above and beyond your existing contract. You need to make sure that your surety company is aware. You need to make sure you have the right documentation, and you have to make sure that your surety receives a notice. And if there's a rider associated with the bond, what that means is an additional increase for the additional amount of work. Those are things you need to make sure that you communicate. And we already discussed performance issues earlier in some of the highlights that we've seen, but go ahead, we'll take time out for a question.
Thank you, Joe. I'm concerned because you mentioned that, and I have been in a situation with the lien waiver situation. However, there was no GC involved. I was a sub. And the lien waiver was asked for before the payment was actually made. And it was actually a third party that we were doing the work for. How does it work in those situations when the lien waiver is asked for and then come to find out a lawsuit was filed, but the actual, I guess it was a GC company, actually said, you know, we're not going to pay you because there's a lawsuit involved, but they insisted on getting a lien waiver, even knowing that they were filing a lawsuit against the company. How do you handle it in those situations?
Yeah, well, that's pretty interesting because there's a couple things you mentioned, and that's why it's important for you to follow your timeline, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every project, most projects deal with the AIA documents for certified pay applications, right?
Yes.
When you submit your pay application, most pay applications from an owner to a GC to a sub, most pay applications are associated with a pay application number, right?
Uh-huh.
I always share with subcontractors to make sure they understand when they're submitting their invoice, that pay application that the GC or the owner is submitting. Because for example, you don't want to be talking about the fact that has my invoice been processed? And they're saying, yes, the invoice has been processed. And you're talking about invoice pay application number 10, but they're on pay application number 8.
I see.
With me? So first of all, there's an interim lien waiver, right? So once the GC submits their invoice, when you submit your invoice in that pay application time frame, when you submit your invoice, you normally would submit that interim lien waiver, okay?
Yes. But my thing is, why are we submitting a lien waiver at all when it's not been paid? Because a lien waiver is
No. Interim lien waiver.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So the interim lien waiver goes with the pay application.
Okay.
So then once that's been paid, okay, then you start working with the other lien waivers up to the final lien waiver showing that's been paid.
Okay.
Okay. So the interim lien waiver just shows that the GC has submitted their pay application, you submitted your invoice, and that interim lien waiver takes note for the owner when the owner is paying the GC for all of their invoices and their tasks. They can see that ABC company performed the scope of work for this pay period for $10,000. Here are their invoices, and here's the interim lien waiver attached. Okay. So now secondly, to the other part of the issue you had, that goes with now the time frame of when you submitted your pay application to how long it took to get paid, right? So there were some red flags that you should have seen, which probably was, it's been 90 days or 120 days, and I haven't received my payment.
Right.
So during that time, that's why it's so important to follow your pay application submission date in your contract.
Mm-hmm.
The owner will have in special provisions, especially with federally funded projects. And I share with you, the owner has a special provision in their contract, which they push down to the GC. The GC has special provisions in their contract. For a federal contract, the GC should pass along those special provisions to you as well. Those special provisions, it will tell you the prompt payment clause, right? And in most cases, is pay when paid, or whatever the GC has negotiated. I've seen on federal contracts where GCs have negotiated 15-day payments or 30-day payments, or based on the state law, based on public works, they've held to the pay when paid.
Mhm.
That's why it's important for you to know how the owner pays.
Okay,
Never go into a contract without knowing how the owner pays. So if the owner is a good actor, and if they basically pay when paid, and they normally don't have any issues, I'm good. But the issue could occur when you have a GC who does not have their administrative processes in place. Okay, because I've seen some DBEs to call and say, Joe, I have not been paid for my scope of work. And the same questions I've just gone over, I go over that same process with them. What pay application are you discussing? You need to reach out to the GC. When does the GC require you to submit your pay application? Because if the GC tells you, please submit your invoice by the 25th of the month, let me tell you what normally goes on. When the GC submits their invoice to the owner on the 25th of the month, they go through a 10 to 15 day penciling or approval process where the architect, the engineer, the owner, and everybody signs off. That's real. Okay, so let's stop right there. That's 15 days, right?
yeah, yeah.
So then, now it goes to the owner on day 15.
So that's when the clock starts based on what you just said.
That's when the clock starts. So if you have a GC who's negligent in getting their penciling process approved and getting that payroll certified, because that's what they're doing. The architects and engineer, they're the ones who certify that pay app for the owner. The GC just doesn't turn in an invoice and the owner accepts it. So make sure you understand that there is a penciling approval process that goes on. Now, as I'm saying that, make sure that you do everything to get your pay application correctly submitted as well, because they are not going to slow down their penciling process to keep calling a contractor and say, fix this, fix this, fix that. What they're going to do is redline it and keep it moving. And that's a whole another issue where I see people say, well, we've been paid. Yeah, we were paid for pay application number 10. But because we had issues with your invoice, we did not submit your invoice. So we're going to submit your invoice this month.
Wow.
Bottom line, all I'm saying is these are issues that we've seen. Now, the good news is the way you avoid them is you make sure that your invoice process is in sync with the GC's invoicing process, and you clearly understand the whole process of the acquisition and the approval for the payment, okay?
Okay, so can you just give us a cliff notes and tell us which construction companies do that? I'm joking.
Yeah, well, bottom line, I'll be honest with you, there are good actors and bad actors, and that's why it's in everybody's due diligence to make sure you synthesize the market and build that relationship with them, because, in most cases, I think, you're going to make sure that, number one, you just don't, relationships are relationships, right? You just don't date everybody, right? Bottom line, you make sure you go through that process and make sure they're answering your questions. And if somebody's freaking out because you're asking questions about the payment process and you're going through the terms and conditions in your contract, trust me, that's somebody you may just want to make a note right there,
Note taken, because that has happened recently. And I mean, just asking the question, I got my head chopped off.
Yeah,
Just,
well,
what are your payment terms? I got my head chopped off.
Yeah, well, just to share with you.
Where are we at? Could we use another minute?
Sorry?
Yes, I think so.
That's someone else. Please mute your phones, everyone.
Okay, yeah, please mute your phone, you're not speaking. But yeah, So those are best practices you need to make sure you do. So make sure you clearly understand the invoicing process. And of course, insufficient personnel, you want to make sure that you, one, have the right personnel assigned to the job. Number two, that you invoice and you cost properly for that personnel. So you're able to show clear justification why that employee is invoicing and make sure there's no concerns and issues with that.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Joe, we have a hand up, Kiela.
Sure.
Keela Fitzgerald.
Yes, thank you. That's some good stuff, Joe. So let me briefly ask you, we had a scenario when we first started where we were doing a job. We actually completed the job, and when it was punch list time and
Right.
cleanup, the GC wanted us to come on the weekend and clean up and, go over the punch list. But it was really bad weather, couldn't do it. And we don't allow our crew members anyways to come on the work on the weekends, right? So we got paid on that Friday, our last payment. And then on Monday, they stopped payment because we didn't come in on that weekend. And we went back and forth. Why are you, why did you stop payment? And it was, all this back and forth. So we went to the bonding company to file a claim for that payment. So my question is, because we went to where the GC was, who the GC was bonded with, it's almost like, well, that's his bonding company. They're never going to side against him, or find him at fault. And they didn't. We had to wait about almost 3 months to go back and forth with everything. But then they came back and they were like, oh, well, we don't, the claim isn't substantiated, whatever. So we had to eat that cost.
Right. Well, once again, to your point, remember what I said earlier about a bond follows what the owner has been invoiced and did not basically pay, right?
Right.
Okay. And a bond follows what the owner paid for and did not receive, right?
Right.
So you can't file a claim on something that has not been invoiced or not performed.
No, we did. He paid us on Friday. And then we were going to come in on that weekend just to clean up. But we received payment. We paid out, did payroll and everything.
Right.
That
But
Monday.
Yeah, right. But wait 1 second. But to your point, do you know if they invoiced the owner for that?
Oh, no, I don't.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
That's why the bond was not substantiated.
Okay.
Right? So that's why you want to make sure. And once again, I just would share with you that, yes, some work, you really don't have to get too detailed in the weeds. It's all about having a great work relationship, speaking with your superintendent, making sure you have a good work relationship with the superintendent to say, hey, look, this is what's really going on. This is what's really going on.
Right.
Bad weather. Are we going to harm the project or another scope of work if we delay it because of the weather and come in the following day, or et cetera? So that's all about having a conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
To make sure that everything is in order, because yeah, that happens. You get some superintendents, who play the game and they're like, nope, get your employee there right now. No, I manage the contract. You don't manage my employees. Tell me what needs to take place. Let's talk through it. I'll make sure that we have the adequate personnel, on site to take care of the scope. And if there are any issues, once again, I want to bring it to your attention in a timely manner,
Right.
so that we're not being negligent or we're not dismissing our scope of work, but here's the real issue that's taking place. And the good news is we have a workaround. So since we have a workaround, will you that workaround, yes or no? Okay. And maybe they'll do it. But yeah, sometimes you have folks who are going to be jerks, and they're going to want to play the game, and then that's where you have to know your rights,
Right.
play the game with them and say, nope, my guys perform. Let me show you based on the schedule and based on the man hours and based on the daily logs, the folks definitely provided the scope. So let's address that. Okay.
Okay.
And
Hey,
then
Joe.
again, yeah, you want to make sure that when your attorney, because I'll be honest with you, you have a lot of attorneys, you want to make sure you have a construction lawyer who understands construction law. I've seen some contractors to mess up and get other lawyers who specialize in other theories of the law. Law is about the theories of law. I have my law degree. I don't practice, but I understand the theories of law. And that's something that when I'm looking at contracts and when I'm going over disputes and handling claims, I could tell you in a minute if the contractor knows what they're talking about, or if their lawyer knows what they're talking about, because if they're not quoting the right theory of the law, they're just trying to scare somebody, okay? So I've seen people get a real estate attorney, a criminal attorney, for a construction contract, and all they want to do is file a claim of action. Yeah, anybody can file a claim of action. But if you file a claim of action and the courts don't recognize it because it hasn't been invoiced and it hasn't been placed in the mortgages court for a lien, they're going to say it's too early. Or secondly, if it's been paid, it's been extinguished. So don't come to us to put out your fights. The courts are not there to put out your fights because you're dealing with a bad contractor, okay? That's why it's so important just to make sure that if you seek counsel to help resolve a dispute, they clearly understand the contract language and the contract law, because some of them are so quick to give you a, to say, hey, here's my fee, I'll process it. And it's like, dude, you processed it, and guess what? There's no claim, but now I have to pay you your $500 or $1,000 because you filed an action and the courts dismissed it because there's no action, okay? So make sure that especially make sure that you understand the difference between construction disputes, real estate disputes, tort, civil action, criminal actions. They're totally different. They're day and night, okay? So good. So we want to make sure, as Josh mentioned, and I want to share with you, I've worked with Josh on many projects, and Josh shared something, and I didn't want to really go into it because I was going to wait for my class. But when he discussed the work in progress, that's something that I use, every day with clients and every day, because that work in progress will really, I use it as my scorecard in my dashboard, okay? Because that will tell you how successful you are on the current project. That will tell you where you're making money, losing money. That will tell you how to make sure you make the right decisions for your company at that time. That will tell you how you need to manage up your project management team to make sure they're doing what they need to do to get the project back on track. And then as you're looking at your backlog, that also gives you a good indication where your cash needs to be based on projects that are cycling off and based on projects that are cycling on. So as Josh mentioned, make sure you clearly understand the work in progress. I share with everybody, I call it the WIP, work in progress. When you get a bond, and if you have a bond, that's something the bond company wants to see, because that will let them know clearly how well you're managing your projects, especially the project that you currently have a bond with that surety agency with at that time. And also it lets you know, once you begin to get towards 50% of the project and substantial completed, you can begin to release some of that bond So therefore now you're releasing that bond. So therefore you're able to now free up your bond line for the next project, as opposed to saying, oh my God, I got to get an additional bond line. In some cases, no, you don't need an additional bond line. You currently have a $5 million bond line, hypothetically. So if you have a $2 million project, and if you're cycling off of that $2 million project, and you're looking at a $5 million project, well, you may be able to free up some of that 2 million onto the remaining bond line that you haven't used. So you're able to free that up, as opposed to, you know, going to your bond agent and saying, I need additional bond. And they're like, why? I don't need to give you an additional $10 million bond. You currently have a bond, but you need to know how to manage your bond. And that's something that I've seen companies do very well. And companies who manage their work in progress in their bond line, where they have a bonded project, and they're successfully managing that project, no issues, they're being paid on time, everything is going smoothly. That tells a bond company, you know what? We're watching how they perform, no issues. They were able to break even. They were able to be profitable, no risk on the bond. We've seen this to take place over the last 2 to 3 projects. They're going to come to you. Your surety company will come to you and say, you know what? Now we think it's time. We want to sit down with you. Now we think it's time. We may want to increase your bond line. Now, the right bond agent will just not come to you and share that with you. They will sit down with you and go over your WIP, and they will show you why it makes sense based on your accounting, based on your project job costing, based on the way you manage your projects. And that's why I share with people, my intention is not for you to get a bond. My intention is for you to successfully manage a project, because if you can successfully manage a project, the bond will never be an issue, okay? So you want to make sure that you don't have inadequate costs and project management system issues as well. And most importantly, when you're working with an owner and you're working with a GC, a lot of them have different systems they use. Some GCs are using, there's a lot of different invoicing systems that they require you to get the software and submit your invoices. So you want to make sure, once again, you read your contract prior to signing that contract to familiarize yourself not only with the special provisions of the contract of when you get paid, but in that special provisions, they'll also tell you how to submit your invoice. Either you will submit your invoices manually to the GC, or most GCs have a software that they use, and sometimes it's a third-party software where you have to familiarize yourself with it. So you will submit your invoice, your interim lien waivers, and if it's a federally related project, you may have to also submit your Davis-Bacon wage forms as well, okay? Estimating and procurement problems, we've talked about that before. These are areas you want to make sure that you're clear. You know, in law, you know, there's something in contract law where it's either a mistake or a unilateral mistake, either someone knew or should have known. So if it's a mistake, it's a mistake on both parties. They'll come together and say, look, we made a mistake. We're going to resubmit the drawings. We're going to resubmit the schedule. We need to provide you with, you know, we're not penalizing you. We need to provide you with another price because we were able to find additional scope for the owner. So here it is. You're good. But a unilateral mistake is clearly put someone knew or someone should have known. So whoever that party is who should have known or knew, they have the responsibility to bring it to the other party's attention. Now, if that garners a conversation, okay? That garners the conversation because you don't want to have someone who plays the game and they know you made a mistake and they should have mentioned it to you, but they're going to watch you go off the cliff. They bear a certain amount of liability as well. So I've seen that to play out as well, where the GC may come back and say, oh no, you made a mistake. No, okay. So now, when did you find this out, Mr. GC? I mean, when did this come to your attention? And this is why it's important that you're in meetings. In most cases, there are envelope meetings, there are weekly poll meetings. You want to make sure as a subcontractor, when your scope and your schedule begins to come into play, that prior to your scope and your schedule, you want to make sure you know how the project is performing. Because if you see that now you have impacts on your schedule, don't sit back and assume the GC is going to come back to you and say, hey, look, you know, the schedule is being delayed, et cetera, et cetera. We need to give you, you know, heads up, or we need to bring this to your attention. So make sure you are watching your schedule and you go to the GC and say, listen, I just want to bring to your attention, we were supposed to mobilize on October the 10th, but during the poll meeting or the envelope meeting, we see that the MEP or electrical contractors or the flooring or whatever scope is still going to be in there for another week. So we now have to basically revise our schedule, and you need to approve our schedule and make sure we're all on the same page, right? So those are things that you own. You own your contract, you own your scope, and you own your schedule. And in doing so, present it to the contractor, I mean, the GC or the owner in that manner, however privy to the communication line you deal with, and they will value the fact that you're basically bringing it to their attention. Okay?
Hey, Joe,
Yep.
it's Virginia. If I can mention something, you haven't gotten there yet, but I'm gonna jump in before you get there. But a couple of things, and just would like your feedback. Just based on my experience when those schedule changes happen, I found that we really have to be pushy, because they will just say, well, you know, your schedule's changed, you have to be, and you have the right to say, we're gonna have to work together on this schedule because I based my work on where you said you'd be. We're going to work with you as much as we can, but you do need to understand that I can't do what it is you need me to do. So let's figure out an option, because some of them will just say you have to be there, you know, and I found that I needed to be kind of, well, my PMs, and sometimes I have to step in and be a little tough and say, you know, no, we're not going to do it. And you were going to talk about the lack of adequate insurance. The one thing I would caution everybody on is every GC is different. I thought I had super insurance because I work for the city of Atlanta. The insurance I have when I work with H.J. Russell and I work with McCarthy is totally different. They may give you an example of a COI, but then they'll come back and say, but we need to see the endorsements.
Yep.
And that is a lot of times where the catchiness will happen. So I just happen to get out of that situation because, you know, not saying anything bad about McCarthy because they're pretty decent to work with, but they have some stringent insurance, unlike any other GC I've seen. So we had to go back and forth quite a bit trying to make sure I had what it was they needed me to have.
Yeah, so to your point, you know, and I shared before, you need to go through every terms and conditions. I call it T&Cs, right? You need to go through every terms and condition of that contract because every contractor is different. Every project is different. And what I share with people to do is you're going through that, you take out the special provisions, you take out the risk management insurance, and you toss it to your insurance agent, okay? And you make sure they clearly understand what's needed for that specific project because, you know, I'm glad you mentioned that, Ms. Murphy, because just like, you know, a federal project, every contract is different. Every project has a different insurance requirement. Several of you have seen on projects and owners contract assurance program, the OSEP. Several of you have seen the CSEP. There are several insurance provisions on projects, and you want to make sure that you know what it means, and you send it to your insurance agent, and make sure your insurance agent understands construction, because that will clearly let you know what insurance you need, or liability insurance, workman's comp, risk insurance, you name it, for that specific project. So therefore, you can get the right premium associated, get your COI, get your accord letter, and once you invoice for that project, you will receive your premiums back. But if you under invoice, working with the right insurance, you may, company, I have seen people say, oops, and get it right. But in this world, you know, especially when you start dealing with insurance companies and the whole deal, you know, they're not going to play any games. So I will caution you, whatever insurance the owner or the GC requires, the reason why it's there is because the owner will pay for it. The owner understands the premium associated, and make sure that you invoice in your right estimating and your bidding, you put down your fees and your premiums, okay? And normally when you invoice, okay, depending on that type of insurance, you can either invoice it up front, or basically you can get reimbursed based on the terms of the contract. I saw one contractor one time, and they totally fell asleep on their CSAP, and they slept on $25,000 reimbursement. And we're going through the process, and I'm like, okay, we're going through the WIP. We're going, wait, why are we showing a loss here? And we're going through it. I'm like, wait a minute. Did you invoice for your premium for the CSAP? No, we did not. So the project's in project closeout. So we had to go to the owner and say, look, unfortunately, here's the accord, everything was done. And just with having the relationship, we were able to get the money back. So you want to make sure you clearly understand it as well. So I will say, when you get a contract, we're so excited we have a contract. We take the contract, we put it on our desk where, yeah, we got the contract. No, the very first thing you do before you bid a project is I take those little bitty tabs, right? Yellow, green, purple, red, blue. And I go through first of all, I tear off the table of contents and I put it on the table. Then I take the contract and I go through every section of those contracts and I tab it, the color that I basically colored it with my table of contents. Then as I go through it, I'm making notes in every section in the document. And then what I'm doing, I'm making notes on the tab. So when I have the document, I don't have to search through the document again to find out where my notes were. I can say, okay, here's my tab. In the tab, reach out to my insurance agent on the risk management. Okay, good. Take this. We're in the bid process, right? The bids are due in 30 days, 15 days. So I'm making sure I'm sending that to my insurance agent and saying, get back to me. The bid is due in 15 days. You get back to me in 7 days. I'm sending it to my attorney. Take a look at this. Bid's due in 15 days. Get back to me in 2 days, okay? So everybody who owes you something associated with that estimate and that bid, same thing with your manufacturers, your suppliers, you send it to them, say, hey, my bid's due here. I'm bidding this project. Oh, by the way, is anybody else bidding this project? You'll never know, they'll tell you, right? So you say, look, I got a good relationship with you, we got this right now. Make sure you give me the best price. You know, so whatever you need as you're going through that contract, you make sure if you have any questions, you reach out to everybody who's going to provide you a quote, from insurance to supplier, manufacturers, you name it. You get the price, you put it in a bid, and you can justify it all day. So when the prime asks, wait, why is this X number fee here? Well, your insurance calls for, you know, this insurance. So, okay, good. You're right. So it's a conversation. All right. So the lack of adequate insurance is definitely an issue. You want to make sure that you have the right insurance. When you're dealing with transportation, you're dealing with all type of security issues, technical issues, you name it. So you want to make sure that you have the right adequate insurance. For example, you're working at the airport, that requires a $10 million AOA working inside of the secured area policy. And once again, the insurance, the agent, I mean, the owner will pay for those premiums. So you just need to make sure that you have the right insurance company involved and everyone understands clearly the insurance associated, okay?
Hey,
And
Joe,
Josh
can
mentioned-
I also mention?
Sure.
For me, it was in the COI that they gave us initially,
Yeah.
it did not have endorsements in it. You know what I mean? It just had PL and the limits.
Right.
So one of the problems that we had was some of the specific endorsements in that PL policy were not very common.
Got it.
So
Yeah.
we now know, though. We now know to not
Yeah,
actually ask
yeah,
for, even
yeah,
if they
and that
don't give them
happens.
to me.
Yeah, that happens. I've dealt with clients who did, worked on fuel stations, all kind of stuff. And they're like, whoa, wait a minute. This, because what you got to understand, in some cases, this not only ties into your premiums,
Right.
this places you in a whole nother categories with workman's comp, everything else.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that if it's an industry that you're in, great. But if it's an industry you're in a scope that you haven't done, you're good. You're just going to have to grow in that and make sure. This is why when you're working on that project, you have the right insurance company who's looking at it, because they will come back and say, whoa, wait a minute, this NACE code calls for this, or this calls for this. You've never done this type of management, although you're in the same industry, but this now comes with us another heightened level of risk. So doing that, not only can it impact or may impact your premium, but it could also eventually impact your workman's comp and your insurance as well. So yeah, make sure you cover all that. All right. And as Josh mentioned in closing from this slide, improper accounting practices, and this is important, please make sure you have an accountant, a bookkeeper, or someone who does your finances who understands construction. I mean, I'm just telling you, this is something where it's like, dude, you're in a different world. You just don't invoice because, I mean, you have to understand construction accounting, as Josh mentioned, accrual, cash basis, how to encumber funds, how to make sure it's on your books. No, you just don't put it on your books. You mean take it off your books because it hasn't been paid or invoiced. Bottom line, if that's a job costing function that you've paid yourself for, you need to make sure it's there. You need to make sure you put it in your receivables. You need to make sure you collect that money. So money just don't fall off the books. And you have to make sure that you have the right construction accounting bookkeeper who understands it, and they can ask the question. And even if you can't answer the question, together you guys can find out the answer, because it just doesn't go away, okay?
Joe, would you happen to have any referrals for or recommendations on any companies that could offer that?
Offer what, I'm sorry?
Accounting, I think you just mentioned,
Oh,
and insurance
yeah,
companies. Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. So, I'll make sure that, everybody's situation is different. So as we go through our intake forms and what have you, that's something that we could share with you, additional resources, and what have you, but share with you, here we go again. There's a lot of companies out there, but you just want to make sure, I'm going to go back to, as Josh mentioned, AI CPA, construction accounting. You just want to make sure once you get to a certain level of invoicing where all of the backup and justification is required, because in some contracts, it's not really feasible for you today to go out and get a full CPA. But once you start invoicing at a certain level, yes, it is required. And of course, that basically is factored in your overhead, and you begin to put that in your overhead. Okay, good. We have a couple more slides, then we're going to take a break.
Thank you.
So we talked about before management issues, and this is why it's important. When key staff leaves the company, you want to make sure you yourself is able to basically step in, address it, deal with it. Don't hide the big green elephant. I have a meeting tomorrow, and it's going to be funny because I had to bring to the owner's attention that someone's no longer there. And I knew that the person was no longer there for the last 3 weeks. And I was given the GC time to tell the owner, but I have a certain level of responsibility within the company as well. So I'm like, wait a minute, now I've given you enough time to bring this to the owner's attention. So tomorrow during the meeting, heads up, the question is going to be asked. So make sure you have your answer. So, just talk things out. The number one thing they want to know, because they hire you to do what you do best. Likewise, they hired you to provide solutions and to deliver a product. So if you have an issue when someone leaves, just make sure you have a transition plan, even if it's temporary, interim, and you put interim, you can say that because that's what they do. They do the same thing all the time on multiple jobs. So just be upfront with your owner or your GC. Okay, make sure that your staff is adequately trained as opposed to inadequately trained, on both the company policies and operations. This is where I talk to companies all the time about value. People always throw out value. And when I talk to companies and clients about value, I share with them what value really means. Value means providing the client with all of the adequate resources that they paid for. All right. So it deals with human capital, human resources, the right staff, the right products, the right materials. So that's value. So make sure you're providing them with the right value. Other management issues is insufficient or incapable personnel, at the project level of upper management. Once again, do what you do best, okay? Don't go into a project, that is a project that you're really going to learn on. There are other projects that you can learn on. There are other things that you can do to begin to learn or to begin to train on before you, get on that saddle, and get ready to, to really take on something that you've never taken on before. Because bottom line, this isn't we don't play with our money. We don't play with our livelihood. You take something on that that you're capable of performing from the beginning to the end. Trust me, don't take on something that, because I've heard people say, I've literally heard people say, well, you know what, we'll learn once they sign the contract. I'm like, good luck on that one. Failure to maintain solid accounting and management systems to track cost and billing. This is something that Josh spoke about, something we spoke about earlier. Make sure you understand you have your own accounting system. The GC has their accounting system. The owner has their accounting system. So which one do you think matters? On that project, you need to make sure that you're in sync with the people who pay you. Make sure you're able to provide the right invoice, the way they want that invoice processed. Because I've had issues before when I've been in owner meetings and I've had people say, well, you know what? This small company hasn't invoiced yet. Because I'm asking the question, wait a minute, I'm looking at the pay application and I'm going through the pay application and I haven't seen ABC's contract. I haven't seen their invoice in the last 3 months. What's going on? And you have GCs who will say funny things like, well, I guess they don't need the money. Or they'll say things such as, well, they just have an invoice. So when I look into it, I'm normally finding out that, nope, the small contractor is still learning their accounting system for the GC, or it wasn't clearly communicated how to submit their invoice. So they're sitting on 3 months of invoices because they have not adequately been trained on the invoice system. So I'm like, wait a minute, time out. Number one, subcontractor, you owe it to your company to get paid. You don't work for free. Secondly, prime contractor, if you know that the sub is not invoicing, come on, you have to make the call to say, give me your invoice, because there's very rare that an owner will have systems in place like myself on contracts and other folks who, when I'm looking at the owner's pay application and I'm going through the pay application, I'm looking at invoices, and very rare will folks make a phone call and say, hey, look, I haven't seen your invoice. What's the issue? So make sure that you have the right systems in accounting to make sure that you're invoicing and tracking your costs properly. Okay. Other factors that come into play: economic downturn, high inflation. We talked about that. I know last week there were certain conversations. Well, you know, everybody's dealing with this issue right now, ladies and gentlemen. And I will tell you that you're absolutely right. Since the pandemic has occurred, material issues, labor issues, there's a lot of issues. You have to communicate to your owner, and you have to show justification to your owner when there's been a sizable increase in materials and products, and it's all a part of your contract and your schedule. So it just depends. You know, so I'm not saying that you're locked in on your price that you provided today. So it just depends on when the material should have been ordered, delivered, received, the whole deal. All those factors come into play, and you have to have the right justification. You just can't submit an invoice and say, hey, the prices are high. No, certain things you need to do. Go to your industry, go to your supplier, go to your material supplier, have them provide the letter, and they will provide the letter. Trust me, when they provide that letter and when you submit it, and give the GC heads up so the GC can have a conversation with the owner, that's the way it's done. I'm in meetings all the time, and I have the GCs advocating for subcontractors, and the same way they're advocating for some subcontractors, they need to be advocating for all subcontractors. And they will say, well, I spoke to my ABC, trade contractor, and they provided me a letter, with the manufacturer, and there's been a increase in prices, so we need to factor that in. So I'm submitting the information, and the changes for the prices for you to have your architect and your engineer to validate and come back and let me know. Because what the engineer and architect will do, they trust me, they know the material prices, suppliers better than anybody. They will reach out, they will justify it, and they will find other alternatives and or basically approve that increase, okay? So I'm just sharing with you, there's a way for you to present it because I'm seeing it happening all over. That's why projects are being delayed. Projects are basically being put on hold because owners are looking at the escalation in prices and everything else for materials and supplies. And they're saying, you know what? Unless this project is a revenue generator, unless this project is a project that we have to get out ASAP, we may want to make a decision to hold off until the prices come down. Or, you know what? We just got notice that prices are getting ready to increase. We were supposed to order the materials in 6 months. We may want to order the materials today. So now if you have justification for it, show the owners will make the decisions for you to order the product, order the materials, store the materials with validation that it has been received and stored, and you can invoice for early materials. It happens all the time, and you can share with the owner that you're saving them money, okay? Weather delays. So we talked about that before. Once again, things happen. When it happens, you need to make sure that you bring it to the owner's attention, okay? I have a real good story I'll tell about that later, weather delays that almost cost somebody their bond. But for them going back and really understanding the weather delays, they would have had their bond called, but they were able to deal with it. Poor site conditions. For every project, you have to make sure that if it requires you to clearly understand the project, the site conditions, everything else, you want to make sure that you walk that site. You want to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what you're going to deal with, and just don't assume anything, because there are unforeseen conditions that, believe it or not, on site visits, the owners or the GCs may not have recognized. And I have seen subcontractors who were bidding and in competition with other subcontractors in their bid to bring it to the GC and the owner's attention. And the owner and the GC's like, wow, you know what? We were not aware of that. Who brought that, who brought that to your attention? And of course, in most cases, the GC will take ownership on it. But in most cases, the GC would say, hey, look, this sub brought it to our attention. They definitely know what they're talking about. We're definitely going to use them. So make sure that you walk the site and you bring your expertise and your past performance experience, and whatever you could do to put yourself at a competitive edge to win the project, do it. Now, don't raise issues when there's not issues. Now, I've seen it backfired also. Nobody's selling what you're buying, okay? Nobody's buying what you're selling. They're only buying what they're looking for. So don't bring up issues that may have been related to other projects that may not be germane to this existing project. Don't do that. And once again, everybody's dealing with labor difficulties right now. I can tell you right now, everybody's dealing with it. Think outside the box. Think outside the box. You may have to go back to family, friends. You may have to go back to technical colleges. You have to go to unions, trade schools. You need to develop new talent. We're faced with, the real attrition happening. People are retiring. They're leaving this industry. We're dealing with the pandemic. You got people who really don't know what a 40-hour work week look like anymore. So we have to be very creative, and everybody's working on it. So, get with your trade organizations. And I tell people, whatever industry you're in, make sure that you're just not partnering with folks that look like you. I know a lot of you, and I know for a fact that a lot of you are in other trade organizations, diverse trade organizations. That's where you want to be, because like minds work together. They're not going to look at you as a certified MBE or DBE. No, they're going to look at you as a professional in this industry, and together you guys help to move the industry forward, okay? And then in doing that, you also develop relationships where you're going to win additional contracts as well. Well, material and equipment shortages, we talked about that. We also discussed owners' inability to pay. These are things that you should already ask the question, before you go into your contract pursuit. In business development pursuit, this is something in my top 3 topics. Number 1, I want to know who the owner is. I want to know if the funding is there. And I want to know basically the lay of the land. If I don't feel comfortable with that, you know what? I'm not going down that path. I'm going to let my competitor or someone in the industry, I'm going to let them go down that path because it'll help put them out of business and give me more additional work. But I'm not going to be the guinea pig for anybody. But one second, then again, I help owners make the best decision for themselves. So if an owner decides to take on that risk, they know the risk associated, so they have to be willing to live with it. I've had some owners where I said, buyer beware, you want to watch this. And they said, well, you know what? I got it, fine. They took on the risk. So if it cost them 10% or 5%, it was a lesson learned. But guess what? They went into it knowing that there was a level of assigned risk. But when you're taking on a bond, trust me, you never put your bond up for any assigned or calculated risk. Business is calculated. So that's why you have to make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's. But you have to weigh the percentage of that calculation as well. And if it's going to be a project that you know that's going to be a heavily issues, red flags surfacing, trust me, you could free your bond up for another project that's going to make your life a whole lot easier and put profitability on your table. Onerous contract terms, once again, you know, I normally do a session in contract law. I'll probably do that later, but there are, you know, illusory terms in contracts and onerous terms in contracts that when you hear them in a construction contract, or when they're not presented, when the right language is not presented in the contract, you just run because it's not a contract. And I'll just tell you quickly, everything we've discussed, a contract is not a contract unless it's enforceable. An enforceable contract requires terms, conditions, quantities, dates, time, schedules. Those are all ingredients that make a contract. Okay, it's like you're baking a cake. You can't bake a cake without the flour and the eggs. So you can't have a construction contract when you don't have a schedule, when you don't have any type of definite terms that defines the scope, that define payment terms. It's not a contract. So if someone gives you a contract, and if it doesn't have definite terms that looks like a contract where it speaks to scope, schedule, payment terms, and all those areas, you have to make sure you ask those questions. And if they're not going to insert those terms and conditions into a contract, let somebody else have that deal. Then you want to make sure their indemnification clauses are not onerous and out of there. I've seen some indemnification clauses where it wasn't meant to, but because most contracts cut and paste and they use boilerplates, it pretty much put the subcontractor at risk for the whole entire project and not their scope. So you need to make sure that the indemnification clause is not crazy and says stuff like, you know, for the life of this project, the subcontractor is responsible. No. You're only responsible for your scope and your schedule and your work. That's it. So make sure you read the indemnification clauses as well. This is saving y'all a whole lot of money because you don't need an attorney to tell you that. They're going to cost you money for that. And the other term that you want to really watch out for, you know, in addition to the indemnification, is definitely liquidated damages. Okay, because they will also put liquidated damages, and liquidated damages are important. But your bond company, when they look at your contract, You know, if the liquidated damages are reasonable to your scope, they're okay. But if the liquidated damages are outrageous, you know, where the liquidated damages are going to charge you $100,000 a day for a scope and schedule that really doesn't apply to you, and they're holding you accountable for other folks' trade, that's a conversation. So I've seen some people to go back and say, hey, look, you know, my surety company is really my surety company, and this is the conversation. In most cases, you probably want to have your surety speak to their surety to get a real understanding. And in most cases, their surety could come back and say, hey, look, it's clean. We were able to reduce the liquidated damages from $100,000 a day, you know, to, you know, $10,000 a day, because it only addresses your scope and your schedule. But, however, if you're working on a project that deals with a revenue generator and everybody's impact is going to cost the owner time, money, and revenue, and they could substantiate every day they lose how much money it's going to cost, well, in most cases, that liquidated damage will stick. So just make sure that based on onerous contracts, you want to make sure that, number one, the contract has all the definite terms that make up a contract. Deals with your scope, deals with your schedule, clear, definite terms, addresses special provisions, how you're going to get paid, when to get paid, accounting methods, and most importantly, indemnification clauses. Make sure that they're not holding you at risk for something that doesn't apply to you. And third, and most importantly, make sure the liquidated damages are clear. And also, if there are no liquidated damages in the contract, and now that you know what you know, don't be like some contractors and all of a sudden they're going to start asking about liquidated damages. So just a quick joke. I mean, it's not funny, but I have one contractor, you were talking about, you know, clauses, and just because something's not in there, if it doesn't hurt you, leave it alone. So he went back and said, wait, how about the liquidated damages? And the owner was like, you know what, that's good. We forgot to put liquidated damages in there. Every trade contractor wanted to run him out of town. So don't be that person, okay? Gotcha. All right, so good. So right now we're right at, you know, the 7:39, 7:40 mark. We're good on time, so we're definitely going to have time for questions. So Beth, how long do we normally take for a break?
We take 10 minutes.
All right, good. So
Was it 5 minutes? 5 minutes. I don't forgot.
no, 10 minutes. All right. So it's 7.
Class is over at 8.
Oh, wow. That's right. Okay. Well,
So you might as well talk on and be done for the
no,
day.
no, we're good. We're good. Let's take, well, what does the class want to do? Because I'm good.
Continue and be done.
Okay, good deal. We'll do it.
If I leave, I can't come back.
I hear you.
I agree.
We'll move forward. So, because we're on time, So what we did was we discussed earlier a lot of the managing growth topics and issues. So in this second part is just basically, we're just now doing an overlay of pretty much some things we discussed, you know, and basically pitfalls and how to avoid them. So, you know, we're not gonna, you know, stay on this topic, you know, a whole lot, but you will get a copy of these pitfalls and solutions. And I just want to share with you, you know, as a business owner, you owe it to yourself. Just because something arises, it's not a detriment to you or to your company. It's business, and business is a process. Business is a process. And as you continue to put your systems in place, you have to manage your process. So a part of managing your process is to identify, you know, flags and areas of mitigation, because construction is all about risk and mitigation, and owners appreciate the fact that there is risk associated in business, calculated risk, and also they understand there needs to be a mitigation plan. So always make sure that when you meet with your project managers and when situations arise, you also kind of have a risk and mitigation, a little comment section. So if there is any risk associated, foreseeable risk associated. They share with you any foreseeable risk. Don't share with me something that happened, 30 days ago, because we're late now, because in the contract, it clearly tells us we only have anywhere from 15 to 30 days to bring something to an owner's attention. And if you fail to do it, now you're at risk. So make sure you understand that, okay? So we're gonna do an overlay right quick. So pitfall number one, ineffective financial management. We discussed that, and that is basically inadequate financial and accounting systems. We already discussed that. So you want to make sure, we talked about uninsured, underinsured, working capital shortages. So pitfalls for financial, here they are. Let's steer clear of them. But today, if they are a hot button for you today, that's fine. Just make sure you make a note of it, and we'll begin to, once again, one bite at a time, work through it and develop the right processes, okay? How to avoid them. Develop relationship with the insurance agent. We told you that. Make sure your resources and your consultants have construction knowledge. Make sure, just because they're a attorney, a CPA, or et cetera, that's why they call everything that legal professionals do, that's why they call it a practice. Why do they call it a practice? Because that's exactly right. They need to be efficient and practice in that area. So if they have not practiced in that area, don't let them be a guinea pig on you, okay? Develop relationship with your surety bond producers. And this is something that you all would do with our bond producers, both with the SBA and others. And even if you have a current bond, make sure you talk to your bond agent. Now, and I'll be honest with you, I've had conversation with bond agents in this relationship. Don't try to run my business or manage my business, because you will get some bond agents and you will get some consultants who, trust me, they want to run your company. And I'm just telling you, buyer beware. When you have someone, they want to start telling you everything you should be doing, you need to take a step back and you need to remind them that, nope, I just need you to give me the best guidance and the best information that I need, because I know what I do best. Now you've given me the best information, so I, as a CEO, can make the best determination for myself. And that's why I've been consulting for many, many years. There are some clients that I will not take on. There are some clients who basically, they respect the fact that all I do is I'm going to give you the right information, right, wrong, or indifferent, so you can be in the most favorable light to make the best decision for your company, because you will never come back on me and say, Joe, you told me this. So that's what a good consultant and good professionals do. Develop banking relationships that include, the right reasonable line of credit, the same thing. You don't need a banking commercial banker who wants to give you, meet with you every other month because they're trying to sell you, a new line, or they're trying to have you meet with another financial person to sell you something because they know your finances and how much money you have on the books, and they're wasting your time. So you just need to kind of have a conversation with them. Hey, look, this is what I'm looking at. So if you find something in this area, great. But you know what? The same way I don't sell my clients something they're not buying, don't sell me something I'm not buying as well. And once again, identify and hire a CPA. Now, I'm going to tell you, identify the right time to hire a CPA.
Joe,
Yes.
we had a question. Ms. Latasha Johnson said, will you provide us some construction bonding company, please?
Oh, no. You will with this. This is the class, the BEP. You will receive in 2 weeks. You will meet with the SBA surety producer who we're working with, and he's a professional in this industry, and he will provide you all the information about surety and bonds. And once again, he knows the industry very well. Once we finish the class, we're going to take a look at where each and every one of you are today. With one, do you have a bond? where are you with your bond? Secondly, if you don't have a bond, we now begin to look at the type of projects you're working with so we can begin to put you in that bond readiness. And a part of the bond readiness is also making sure concurrently you have the right financial structure as well. So that's why this is not a one-off conversation. I just want to share with you because I've had some people to, go through the workshops and automatically they're making phone calls. Hey, I need a bond. Getting a bond insurance is not like calling your State Farm, Allstate, Progressive Insurance on a Thursday for a policy on a Friday. So that will definitely kill the process. It don't work that way. But trust me, everything we do is a process. So if you go through a process, and we have a lot of success stories who have gone through a process and in doing so, they're better off now. So yes, that's a part of this process. And of course, pitfall, no comprehensive business plan. Everybody needs a roadmap. Everybody needs a contingency plan. Everybody needs to have goals. And I always tell people, that's why the Lord gave business people 5 fingers on one hand. All you need to do when you're setting your goals, don't use all 10, just use 5, and just make sure you set the goals, and each one on the palm of your hand, you got them on your paw, so you can address each one. Goal number 1, here's our goal. Here's how we're going to measure that goal. Here's how we're going to, here are the KPIs that's going to get us to accomplish the goal. Here's the time that we reset and look at the goal every 30 days to make sure we're on track. This is when we make sure that we use a 90% integrity goal, 10% flexibility, because we have to give ourselves flexibility. But every goal you put down for your company, you should play out for that year or for that goal period 90% of the time. If you're not committed, don't put it down, because if you put it down and change it, I'm not going to take you serious. The GC is not going to take you serious. Your business employees would not take you serious. So I'm just going to tell you, for corporations and company, I spend anywhere from the 4th quarter to the 1st quarter going over a week of goal setting, making sure that we set the goals for the upcoming year based on the previous year accomplishments to make sure that we identify the right 5 goals for the next year. It could be a repeat to our 3 to 5 year plan, or we may make adjustments. But once you make those goals, you have the right key performance indicators that get you there. You have the right businesses that's going to put revenue on your book. You have the right accounting. This is so important, because if you do it right and you strategically plan appropriately, your employees would play full out for someone who has a plan and have a work plan, and they manage that work plan, right, Beth?
Yes, yes.
How
He
to
loves his plans. He lives by the work plan.
how to avoid pitfalls. Number 1, ineffective financial management. We've talked about this before, so you'll get this. We talked about right agents, right surety bonds, right CPA, right relationships. And you guys are like, why are they saying this over and over again? Why? Because this right here is the heartbeat of a business, all right? Wait, what's going on? Okay, here you go, all right? All right, good. Unrealistic growth and expansion, pitfall number 3. We talked about this before. You want to make sure that, you only want to take on, once again, what is it that you do best? More is not always better. More is not always better. Trust me. Companies will come after you probably because you have the right small business size. You're a DBE, you're MWBE, et cetera, you're 88 firm, et cetera. No, you have to be very careful. You do not want to lead with your certification. And if you're in the discussion with your certification, you want to make sure, yep, I happen to have this certification, but by the way, this is what we do, and this is what we do well, okay? So make sure that you always take on the right type of growth and don't overdo it, because more is not always better. When you're in the right market, and when we're talking about the bipartisan infrastructure, over 20 billion coming to our region, we're going to be looking at what's taking place in federal highway, airport, transit, local municipalities. And as we share those opportunities with you, you have to make sure that you take a step back and say, okay, based on these areas, which are the business pursuits that I really want to go after? You know the owner, you know how they pay, you know the GCs, you know it's work you do well. That's your pursuit target. And I would challenge you, those 2 to 3 agencies, or probably one, because trust me, there's going to be enough money. There's going to be enough money with the feds, with the states, and the local municipalities. So if you're only in one agency, let's say federal highways, you're going to have enough work to do work with the state highways, with the local highways, and with the federal highways. So there's going to be enough money. So what opportunities? So you want to make sure that you build your capability statement to speak to that. And once again, they're going to be interested in knowing this is what this company does. I'm not looking for this company to come to me and say, how can I do business with you? What do you think I can do? I mean, I'm not being, I don't want to make fun of it, but those are things that procurement and contract officers tell me all the time. Joe, if I have a DB who comes to me and that's how they lead, they've just done the homework for me, because I've taken their card, but guess where their card is as soon as they leave, okay? So don't be that person. The way you want to lead, and I always share with people, when you're talking to contract agency, GC, the whole deal, you want to talk industry, you want to talk projects, you want to ask them things such as, what are some of the neat projects you're working on now? What are some of the neat projects that you're pursuing? Okay, you're asking those questions because that's giving you a lead in, because if they're on a project right now that you're not working with them on, sorry, so sad. But now when you're asking them, what are some pursuits that you're pursuing? Now you can begin to open up conversations to see how you can help them with that scope, okay? That's business pursuit 101. All right, pitfall number 4, poor management. We talked about inadequate supervision, the inability to administer, and most importantly, make sure the change orders, make sure your folks understand that. Once again, read the contract. The contract will tell you when to submit a claim, and also how and when to submit change orders. Don't have your folks coming to you saying, hey, I got an invoice for this. Well, where's the, backup? Where's the written change order? Where's documentation? Well, they said, well, who's they? I've never seen an invoice that was paid based on they, okay? Contracts, with claims, make sure you understand the timeline to submit claims. That's important. Most claims are reasonable. That's why it's in there. If you're going to submit a claim, make sure you submit a claim. Claims could be for time. It could be for an administrative change order. It could be for time, schedule, additional funding, justifiable, all that stuff. So when you submit your claims, make sure you have all the adequate documentation. Backlogs are important because as you're working on projects, you have to be building your pipeline. So make sure you have, as you're working on projects, as you're cycling off of projects, make sure that you have the adequate backlog, that as you cycle on, the projects are going to come on, and you want to make sure you have the right financing in place, that you're not going to have to go borrow money. Because if you did everything successfully in managing your projects successfully with your profit, you're moving some of those profit and those dollars with your overhead and for your additional pursuits to cycle on and to fund those next projects mobilization until, the payment period starts going. Make sure you have the right lead time to prepare your bids. So often when folks are requesting bids with a short duration of time, what does that tell you? And sometimes it tells you that they're not real, They're trying to dot their I's and cross their T's for what we call good faith efforts. But what I tell people, good faith without fair dealings is a no deal. So if you're gonna send me a pre-bid, a bid and a request to bid outside of a normal procurement time frame, sorry, I'm not gonna bid it. I'm not gonna bid it for you. I'm not gonna be the guy or the company. And for you ladies, don't be the one just because they need a price to compete with another bid, that's not the deal. That's not the deal. But once again, I only put you in the best position to make the best decision. So yeah, there are some cases where you have a great relationship with the GC. They need a couple prices, you've already told them your workload is, too much. You're not going to bid this specific project with them. And they need a price just in case. But if you do give them a price, make sure it's a price you can live with. So don't try to get caught in the game. And how to basically avoid those poor management areas. Number one, you got to closely manage your projects, folks. You have to have warning systems, and those are weekly poll meetings or monthly meetings with your team where you meet individually with that project manager, or you bring in all your project managers and you have them to report, quickly on how well their projects are going. And you have, 3 or 4 indicators. So don't recreate anything. Most projects have several tools. So today, there are several softwares out there where you're tracking your daily logs, you're tracking your RFIs, your requests for information, you're tracking your change orders, you're tracking your project schedules. Make sure you have the right tools so when they come in, you can pull up those tools and you're discussing that. But in order to effectively discuss that and measure and manage it, your subcontractors and your project managers and your team, they need to be submitting that documentation daily or weekly, because that's the only reason why the systems are there. The systems are there to be a dashboard for you. Why do we have a dashboard in our car? Because if your gas fuel meter is running low on gas, and if you know that you have to go 100 miles and you only have 5 miles, are you really going to get there? So make sure that your construction project dashboard, you use it just like your fuel. You have to have more gallons in the tank that's going to allow you to get to where you're going. So if you're going to go 100 miles, you need to make sure you have a half a gallon in your tank. So I use that as an analogy because so often this is the #1 pitfall with customers and clients of mine who they don't want to really hold their folks accountable. Life is about accountability, folks. If you have with folks who work for you and they get upset when you're holding them accountable, sometimes you have to talk to them and just say, no, we're just having a conversation. I'm not trying to, give you a hard time. So let's just talk through this, okay? We already talked about estimating. Everybody's going to make sure that they have the right estimating tools. If you don't have an estimator on hand, make sure you outsource one. Make sure you measure twice and you only cut once. That's something my grandfather told me years ago. He was a contractor. My father was a contractor. I grew up in the contracting world. That costs you money. So you want to definitely make sure you estimate, you measure twice, because you can only cut once. And when you cut twice, that's costing you money. So make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's. And trust me, if you put down a price and if you don't feel good about it, back away from the estimate, come back to it on the next day, because you're giving yourself adequate time to put the job together. Reach out to the industry, check your numbers, check your quotes, because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, when you win the job, It has to be a job that you're willing to live with and a job that you feel good about. And the last thing you want to say is, you don't want to be the person to say, man, I won that job, but we left a lot of money on the table. It happens, all right? Once again, as I said, either you hire an experienced estimator or as needed. But most importantly, you all are the professionals of your job, of your trade. You should have at your reach constantly updated prices with your suppliers and your manufacturers, with your laborers. Every so often, you're updating your price lists because you have them. And in most cases, they're going to lock you in for anywhere from 6 months to 30 days. So make sure that you basically say, hey, look, we're in for the next 30 days, et cetera. Yeah, Beth.
Miss Latasha Johnson wanted to know, what's a normal time frame? 14 days? She said, I asked because we get a lot of requests that is written 2 weeks. Let me see, can I unmute her?
Yeah, basically, yeah, that's a very good question. Once again, you want to take a look at your industry because it's industry specific. If you're dealing with shop drawings and you have engineered documents and drawings and all that stuff. No, 2 weeks may not be it. So you want to make sure based on your industry, et cetera, what's normal for that industry. But in most cases, yeah, how much time it takes you to put together a bid. So what you don't want to do and what you don't want to have happen is you don't want to have something that's going to disrupt your day-to-day business operations in your systems. So if you have systems in place that could respond to a 2-week RFP or bid, you're good. If you know that you need probably 30 days, you only need to chase those that give you the adequate amount of time.
Okay.
Your point, just to share with you, from industry, what I advocate to the construction world, advocate it should be a minimum of 30 days. Okay? But in most cases, it could be 2 weeks to 30 days. But if you get something a week out, come on. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, we talked about ownership. You need to have systems in place. If the ownership changes, there's a whole lot of stuff on that. You want to have the right legal team and everything on track for that. But it's real, it happens, and I've seen it happen. I've seen it go through seamlessly, and the owner and the GC is okay. And I've seen it happen where they said, nope, we got to find somebody else because it's in the contract as well. There are terms and conditions that discuss ownership changes and what have you in the contract if it happens or et cetera, okay? Once again, we talked about loyal customers. You want to make sure you know your customers. You want to be visible and perform beyond expectations. I tell people, you need to definitely deliver more than you promise. And, because there's enough people promising stuff they can't deliver on. And if they can't, if they do that, let them be the one. Basically, that's going to help you to basically win more business because the folks who are taking that chance, trust me, we live in a small construction world. The word will get out, and I'm in meeting with prime contractors and owners, and they'll bring up contractors' names. In most cases, I'm having to say, no, you just need to make the phone call and ask the question. Don't assume anything. But a lot of majority contractors, when small contractors are involved, you would not imagine the stuff that they would say. They don't see somebody in two meetings. Oh, they must have went out of business. Oh, they're having financial problems. I mean, this is the real. So you want to make sure if it's a Friday phone call, do the Friday phone call. It's just to say, hey, how you doing? Sorry, we're in business. It's sometimes a game we got to play. Partnering outcomes, make sure you have the right partner. Make sure you avoid, disputes. Make sure you have the right communication. Have the right quality control, quality and efficient tools on hand. And most importantly, we talked about performing, be on time and perform. And always work your relationships, you know. Go back to, this is already going into fourth quarter, you know, soon. Go back to your clients from 2019 to 2020, if you have, in 2021. If you did not hear from them, go back to them and reach out, because guess what? In most cases, they're still in business, and people who buy from you, they're buying your services. And so often I've seen people to leave a project, go to the next one, and fail to follow up. So always follow up. And this is pretty much what I discussed, and you guys will get this presentation. But yeah, you want to follow up and build great relationships. You know, payment performance bond, you know, I'm not going to go into that because Daryl will be speaking on the bonds. But yep, there are 3 formal bonds that he will be going over. Payment bond, and that's basically just to make sure that if you get the bond, that you're going to pay your suppliers and manufacturers, because yep, they're the ones who will submit a bond on you. And once again, in order for them to have a moving claim of action on a bond, the invoice they're calling, they have to prove that the owner has paid it. The GC has paid it. So if someone's upset with you and saying, hey, look, I haven't been paid, I'm going to submit my bond. What you need to do is get on the phone with the GC and the owner and say, look, I have my manufacturers or supplier who's not happy because this is gone outside of the payment period, and I've invoiced for it. Not only did I invoice for it, we delivered it, we installed it, and or commissioned it, and you haven't paid us. So now that surety company, that supplier is not knocking on your bond door, they're knocking on the GC and the owner. But if that supplier is calling a lien and being a bully, because suppliers and manufacturers will use the lien waiver as a collection process. So folks are aware of that game as well. So make sure your manufacturer and suppliers understand that you're upfront with them, you're going to be honest with them. So you're going to let them know this is pay when paid. The owner has not paid it. We've submitted it. You have the information. So when the owner pays it, I may need another 30 days, and make sure your owners, you know, and everybody is right with the payment period. Performance bond is exactly what it is. This deals with the bond is required for you to basically make sure that you're going to perform the job. And if you don't perform the job, you know, they will find a replacement solution. That's why documentation is important, ladies and gentlemen, because they cannot call the bond unless they have adequate documentation that you failed to respond, you failed to communicate, or et cetera. Because the last thing you want to have is a bully surety company or a bully contractor threatening you with the fact that they're going to call your bond, they're going to do this or that. Well, you know what? They have to show all of the adequacy that you did not, that you failed to perform, and it was 100% your fault. If it was their fault because they changed the schedule, if it was their fault because of unforeseen conditions, or if it was their fault for any reason, they cannot hold you liable. Okay? So good. So that pretty much talks about the bond, the payment performance bond. Daryl will go over that. Basically, Beth, I'm going to turn it back over to you, but you know, I just really want to share with you. I'm sorry I went over 11 minutes, but had some good questions and what have you. But these are areas that, you know, large businesses, you know, encounter, they go through. So once you put your systems and processes in place that talks to the managing growth information that we'll share with you, you want to make sure that you have systems and processes that can speak to each one of them, some more than others. And as you set your goals for your company, and as you have your weekly or monthly project management meetings, you're not hiding the big green elephant, because if it's an issue, discuss it. If it's not an issue, there's no issue. Everything's okay. That's how you move your projects along. Project A, how are we dealing with accounting? Well, you know, we have an accounting system. We go through A, B, C. No. I'm just asking you, what are the payment terms? Have we invoiced? What's our payables and what's our AR? So you're able to see. So if your AR is outside of 30, if it's 60 or 90, that's when bells and whistles are going off. So, you know, just working with companies alone to say, look at your accounts receivable, man, you have $1 million in receivables. You have $1 million in receivables, that's your money. Or are you going to a bank and borrowing money? No, you need to have better systems to make sure your receivables do not go outside of 60-90. Anything out of 60-90, that's an issue. And trust me, when you make that phone call, you don't make that phone call at 90 or 100, you make that phone call at 60. And the phone call at 60 is just, hey, just checking bases, everything's good. Submitted the invoice, is everything on track to be paid? Yep, we submitted the invoice. We got notice from the owner that they've processed the check. The check should be here in 7 days. So you know, when we get the check, we don't automatically pay you. So once we get the check from the owner, we have 7 to 10 days to pay you. So slow down. So, but that's a conversation you want to know in the AR timeline. So whoever handles your ARs, they should have a note from 60 days to 90 days, what's going on with the transaction. And when you meet with them weekly, you have your transaction log, and they should be able to tell you 60 days where we are. Hey, no problem. I met with contractor A. They submitted the invoice. It's being processed. Great. So now when 90 days happen, guess what? It better be paid. Because if you told me in 60 that they told you it was being paid, and now we're at 90 and it's not being paid, I can't believe what you're saying. So don't bring me nothing that somebody's promising you with my money, because this is our money. And let me tell you what I do with this money. I pay my salaries, I pay my employees, I pay my jobs, all right? So that's why it's important, ladies and gentlemen. So good, it's been a good class. So if anyone has a couple of questions for me, I'll take one or two, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Beth. It's been a great class, and we look forward to seeing you in the next class and going through the process.
Okay, if anyone think of a question, just hop right in and raise your hand. Our next session will be October the 11th on estimating and bidding. And that will be Lee Thomas and Lewis Parkins will be the instructors. And the survey for this class, the link, I put the link in chat. Also, I'll send an email out tomorrow morning if you guys are tired tonight and have things to do. We know it's late. We ran over.
Yep, and Beth, I just want to make sure everyone's aware. Next week, we're starting back up the stakeholder business development. So please be on time, because every week, every session, we're going to have a 10 to 15 minute with the stakeholder telling you and reminding you what certification they accept and how to do business with their organization, and also sharing any low-hanging fruit that's out there. So Beth, I think next week we have GDOT.
Yes.
Okay, so next week is going to be GDOT. We're going to start on time because they're going to get in and out. So they're going to start at 6 o'clock, and for the first 15 minutes, they're going to talk about how to do business with GDOT. Following GDOT is going to be followed by a series of Clayton County, Cobb County, City of Atlanta, and others. So make sure that you all, are there We're not going to have time to ask too many questions because what we want, the intent, and we're being very intentional for that session. We want you to get just an overview, and that's the benefit of being in the class. We want them first to know who you are. And then secondly, we want you to get an overview of what they're doing, certification, and any upcoming opportunities. Because once we're done with the program, they will get a list of all the completers of the program, along with your nice photos and bios and capability statements that Beth is working with you on as well, okay? Great.
That's it.
You guys have a great week. Any other questions? If not,
Fantastic presentation, guys. Thank you so much. We really needed
appreciate
that.
you guys have a great rest of your week. Be safe.
Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
You can. Bye-bye now.
Good night.